About 60 hours to the November 6th governorship election in Anambra State, INEC holds crucial meeting with security heads, political parties, and other stakeholders to ensure that everyone is on the same page. And the U.S. threatens visa restrictions for those found to be responsible for election-related violence or undermining the democratic process and their families. Well, how far-reaching is this threat? Big question. Hello and welcome to Politics Today, live on Channels Television. I'm Kayode Okikiolu, sitting in for Seun Kimbaloye here in Lagos. Well, tonight we keep the spotlight on Anambra State, which incidentally is also known as the light of the nation. Well, there are only about 2 days between us and the highly anticipated November 6th governorship election, and so much issues to tick off the checklist, the most prominent being security, and that's by the police, the NSCDC, the military, and other agencies involved. Then moving on to logistics and the conduct of the election by INEC, and not forgetting last-minute moves by political parties, and perhaps the most important, which is voter turnout and participation of the Anambra people, amongst other issues. Tonight on the program, we will be following up on these very important points, and we'll dig deep to see just how prepared all the stakeholders are. Clearly, time is of the essence. Well, it's a bumper package tonight, but first, let's take you through some other political stories. Here's our political roundup.
Vice President Professor Yemi Osinbajo earlier today presided over the weekly Federal Executive Council meeting at the State House, Abuja. The meeting is holding as President Muhammadu Buhari attends the UN Climate Conference, COP26, in Glasgow, Scotland. Physically present were the Chief of Staff to the President, the Secretary to Government of the Federation, Ministers of Works, Aviation, Justice, amongst others. The Minister of Works, Babatunde Fashola, is giving timelines for the completion of major federal government projects. He says the Abuja-Kano Road will be ready by 2023, while the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway and the second Niger Bridge will be finished in 2022. He stated this during the 2022 Budget Defense session of the Ministry before the House Committee on Works.
When will the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway be finished? It will be finished in 2022. That is the schedule. Be finished in 2022, Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. The second Niger Bridge will be finished also in 2022. That is the plan. And it is on schedule. The contractors tell us that the spans of the bridges will be fully connected by the end of Q1.
The Lagos State Governor is appealing to families and residents to remain hopeful as rescue operations continue to find more survivors following the collapse of the 21-story building in the Ikoyi area of the state. Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu, who visited the scene for a second time today, announced that a panel of inquiry has been set up to investigate the incident and listed the names of survivors so far.
Hope is what is in short supply, but hope is what we all require right now. And so we need to be strong in hope and believe that indeed our loved ones are there, and they can still have oxygen to breathe.
Well, let's now get into the meat of the show tonight. With just a little over 2 days to go to the November 6th governorship election in Anambra State, well, political activities are winding down, and the attention now turns to the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, as well as the security agencies following the security breaches in the state this past week. Now, the chairman of INEC, Professor Mahmood Yakubu, today held an interactive session with the Inspector General of Police, Usman Alkali Baba, the convener of the National Peace Committee, Bishop Matthew Kuka, candidates of political parties, and other stakeholders. And essentially, this meeting was to straighten up the rough edges and ensure that everyone is on the same page. We'll definitely be bringing you some highlights of that meeting where the chairman of INEC, the Inspector General, as well as other stakeholders spoke about preparations for that election. Well, the United States of America says it is looking forward to a peaceful and transparent election in Anambra State with results that accurately reflect the will of the people, while also pledging to pay close attention to actions of individuals who interfere with the democratic process or instigate violence against civilian populations before, during, and after the elections. The U.S. says it will not hesitate to consider consequences, including visa restrictions for those found to be responsible for election-related violence or undermining the democratic process, and their family members as well. Well, the statement from the Public Affairs section of the United States Diplomatic Mission to Nigeria calls on citizens, electoral officials, party members, and security force personnel to do their part in ensuring a credible and secure electoral process. Well, the question is definitely how far-reaching that threat will be. Now, for those wondering why the governorship election in Anambra State is so highly contested, well, let's give you a history of how the state got to this point. And this takes us all the way back to what you might call the beginning of what we know as a Fourth Republic in 1999. Well, the seat of power in Anambra State has been one particularly characterized by lots of intrigues with so much twists and turns. In fact, Anambra State has had more governors than Nigeria has had presidents. And here's a brief history. Now, on return to democracy in 1999, the candidate of the People's Democratic Party and an associate professor of politics, Chiwoke Mbadinuju, emerged as the governor of Anambra State. Well, he had a rocky 4-year run that culminated in him reportedly losing the support of so-called political godfathers. As a result, he didn't clinch a second term. So in his stead, a medical doctor, Dr. Chris Ngige, who is the current Minister of Labour, was elected governor in an election that was strongly contested over irregularities. Now, this led to the annulment of his victory by an election tribunal in 2005, a decision that was later upheld by the Court of Appeal in Enugu in 2006. Now, this paved the way for a businessman, Peter Obi, of the All Progressives Grand Alliance, APGA. Now, his stay in office was not without intrigues as well. First, he was impeached by the State Assembly in November 2006, just 7 months in office, and his deputy, Mrs. Virginia Etiaba, took his place. Now, this made her the first ever female governor in Nigeria's history. But then this only lasted for 3 months, as Mr. Obi successfully challenged his impeachment in court and returned in February 2007. But that's not all. Then came elections in April of the same year, which saw Mr. Andy Uba, yes, Mr. Andy Uba emerged winner. But again, Mr. Obi went to court, that's the Supreme Court, and reclaimed his 4-year mandate in June 2007. It's at that time. And that's how the Anambra governorship election went off cycle, as they say. Well, he won re-election in 2010 in a contest that had 2 of the frontliners in this coming election. That's Professor Chukwuma Soludo and Senator Andy Uba. In 2004, former Governor Peter Obi then handed over to the winner of the November 2013 election, former banker Willie Obiano of the All Progressives Grand Alliance, APGA. Well, Governor Obiano was re-elected in 2017, and he is due to leave office next year. So perhaps this might have helped our viewers better understand how we got here. But let's delve into what we're expecting and looking forward to, that's Saturday's election and the fine details of the preparations. Tonight on the program, we're joined by 3 gentlemen to prosecute this particular topic. Mr. Festus Okoye is INEC's National Commissioner and Chairman, Information and Voter Education Committee. He joins us via Zoom from Awka this evening. We also have Mr. Clement Nwako, Executive Director, Policy and Legal Advocacy Center, that's Black. He's also an election monitor. He's monitored several elections in this country. So his experience will definitely come to bear on the program this evening. He also joins us virtually. And from our Abuja studio is Mr. Wilson Inolegu, former police IG. Gentlemen, it's great to have you on the program. Well, like I said, time is of the essence. And I'd like to begin with Mr. Okoye. So I mean, INEC had that interactive session where you had the IG, you had Bishop Kuka, as well as other major stakeholders, not forgetting the candidates of the political parties as well. If you could just give us the highlight of that meeting, what did that meeting achieve today?
As you know, the meeting was convened by the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, to appraise the critical and major stakeholders of where we are in relation to our preparations for the election. The Inspector General of Police also attended the meeting. The Catholic Bishop of Sokoto Diocese was also at the meeting, but his major event really is tomorrow during the signing of the peace accord. And for the signing of the peace accord, we're expecting our former head of state, General Salami Abubakar, who will preside over the signing of the peace accord. So the chairman updated the political parties and the candidates in the election of our preparations and how far we have gone. The Inspector General of Police also gave a very graphic description of the number of police personnel and the number of security agencies that will be deployed for the election and their mode of deployment and why we have so many security agencies deployed to Anambra State. But I think that fundamentally, what was fundamentally the highlight was the fact that the chairman informed the political parties and their candidates that the commission is ready for the conduct of the election. And as you know, we have a total of 2,525,471 registered voters for the purposes of this election, spread across 5,720 polling units. But out of these 5,720 polling units, we have not printed ballot papers, result sheets, and we are not going to deploy the beavers to 86 of these polling units that have zero number of voters. So the chairman appraised them of all these dynamics, and the political parties also asked very, very critical questions relating to the beavers, relating to the 86 polling units where we are not going to print ballot papers and result sheets. And also that the general concern was also in relation to the security of the voters, in relation to the security of ad hoc staff. But everybody is upbeat, and there was a consensus that this election must go on, that it is about the future of the state, it's about the future of democracy, and it's also about continuity of electoral process. So at the end of the day, the political parties and the candidates left the meeting satisfied that everything is being done to make sure that we have a very good election.
Well, for the benefit of those who were not at that meeting, I mean, they definitely would know what exactly the IGP said. You have tried to detail some of the things that the INEC, on the path of INEC, some of the issues that were delved into, but particularly about security, because we have Mr. Neligu also in our Abuja studio. I'd like to ask you, Mr. Okoye, what were the specifics regarding deployment that the IGP reeled out today?
The Inspector General of Police basically told the nation that they are going to deploy at least 34,000 police personnel for the purposes of the election. The Nigerian Navy and the Marine Police are going to also deploy because we have a total of 138 polling units in the riverine areas. So the Marine Police will be deployed to some of these places. The deployment of police personnel to our INEC local government offices, he informed us, has already been completed. And he also made it very, very clear that the main business of deployment, the main business of the various security agencies in terms of this election is to give confidence to the voters that when they come out to come and vote, they will be protected. And he also warned that nobody should test the resolve of the security agencies in making sure that nothing untoward happens to election materials, happens to election personnel, and also happens to the voters. So he informed us that all the assets that they require to protect the voters have also been deployed, and the deployment is currently ongoing to all the local governments. He told us that at the inner cordon of the polling units will still be manned by unarmed security agents, but that the middle cordon will also be patrolled by the mobile police and the other security agencies, and that in big polling units, that the security agencies who are armed will be stationed outside the big polling units, and that nothing untoward will happen to any of the voters and any of the election officials. So he told us basically that the security agencies are ready for the conduct of the election.
But personally for you, Mr. Okoye, having moved around, I mean, you were at the state headquarters of INEC, and you've had interactions across the states for INEC. Do you feel safe enough for this election?
Yes. For instance, I'm at the INEC headquarters presently, and the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission is at the INEC headquarters interacting with the registration area supervisors, local government supervisors, and other categories of staff that will be deployed tomorrow for the purposes of this election. And the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission and the national commissioners also went to Dunukofia local government, went to Oka South local government, and one other local government to monitor the distribution of permanent voters' cards. And in these local governments, you could see the enthusiasm of the people who have trooped out in mass to come and collect their permanent voters' cards. Yes, there are concerns about security, and there's no doubt about that. Nobody is denying that. People are slightly tentative in relation to their safety and when they come out to come and vote. But the sense I have is that there's a determination on the part of the people of Anambra State to go out and exercise their democratic franchise, because it seems to me that they believe that this election will determine a lot of things for them. It will determine the future of the electoral process in this state. It will also determine how they will be governed for the next 4 years. So I think that I have that sense that the people understand the nuances and dynamics of this particular election, and they don't want any person to exercise that right for them. They want to exercise their democratic franchise and make their own determination.
Right. We'll come to the issue of PVCs and distribution, how far the commission has gone in a moment. But let's take this to Mr. Enalegu in our Abuja studio. I recall the IGP some days ago speaking about deployment for this particular election and saying that this sort of deployment, I mean, over 30,000 men, that's just for the police, that it has its advantages and disadvantages. And he tried to focus on the disadvantages, saying that the police is working to try and resolve the disadvantages, which might be, for example, intimidation. I mean, some people might just see security operatives around, and for them, instead of feeling safe, they feel intimidated, judging from some of the precedences we have had. So in terms of fine-tuning that area, roughing up those smoothing those rough edges, what should the police be doing now?
Thank you very much. I think it's about creating assurance. You know, when you're talking about election security, they're in three phases: before, during, and after. Now, you have this massive deployment because of the obvious security challenges that Anambra in particular has witnessed in the recent months. So you can't say you have too much of them. But what I think the IG is trying to do is to create that assurance in the first phase before the election. You are going to have a lot of patrols, a lot of show of force. They are not meant to intimidate any person, but to reassure the voters that you can come out, you have security provided for you. And so this time, you are going to have the police being the head of the Interagency Consultative Committee on Election Security, trying to interact with the public, reassure the public. So communication is going to be very critical. We are not going to have all the agencies issue statements. That will be coordinated. Might be the police being the head of the Interagency Consultative Committee on Election Security. They get their information and disseminate quickly. That is one thing that I think the police and other security agencies will be doing before the election. You are going to have certainly permanent checkpoints, patrols along the waterways like the INEC Communication Commission has just talked about. You are going to have a lot of mingling with the public, talking to the public, reassuring, talking to the clergy, talking to opinion leaders, and all the rest of them. And when you do this, when the people see that they can move around, you are not having incidents, then they'll be assured. So that number, because they are going to run in shifts, in this kind of operation, if you have long shifts, the personnel are going to get tired. Therefore, you're going to have those on duty and those who take over from them. But when you see the number, you think the number is large. But when you begin to break them into the various shifts that they have to perform, and then on the election day, what are you going to have? Like you have already mentioned, you are going to have the polling units and stations, the racks, and the local government election offices. You're going to have deployments in those places. Those that will accompany the electoral materials to their respective polling units and stations, you're going to have them. And then once the results are compiled as they have been transmitted, the other materials that will be accompanied to the rack and to the other and to the local government election centers. So when you look at the distribution, the patrols, you begin to see that the number is not that too much. But you are going to also, what I think, then during the election, you are going to have response. I think the police is going to work very strictly on a response. In that case, it therefore means that the police hotlines and other security hotlines will be provided so that the various operation rooms and centers and field operation centers, you are going to have communication. It's critical so that once there is a distress call, you have robust response. That is going to further create reassurance on the mind of the public. And then the protection of the electoral materials, the electoral officials, and the rest of them. And that's why you have those critical masses like the IG talked about, those in the inner cordon, the inner cordon, and those that will be outside, those in critical in the three senatorial zones, yes.
So let's break this down further, and because then, I think it's important to help people better understand what to expect that day. I mean, you've talked about some of those areas, but let's get deeper into it. In terms of rules of engagement, because this is also very important for prospective voters. They want to know what to expect from the police. Where should the police stay? Where should they not stay? What can they do? What can they not do? Because looking at the figures, over 34,000 for 5,720 polling units. That's an average of about 6 police officers per polling unit. So, I mean, that's substantial. So in terms of rules of engagement, what should the voters expect? What kind of conduct should they expect from security operatives?
The police and other security agencies will operate or uphold professional standards. And what do I mean? When you go to the polling unit to cast your vote, the policeman is going to be there quietly observing as you go to cast your vote. But where somebody comes to disrupt the process, then the presiding officer will draw the attention of the police officer present at that police station to take such individual from the polling unit. Then those instructions for each polling unit might be wearing political party emblem, coming to engage in other criminal acts by like distributing money and all the rest of them, engaging, trying to corrupt the process. And such crime being committed in view of the police officer, the presiding officer will draw his attention, and when those things are being done in his presence, such people can be taken away from them and questioned. But the idea is crowd control at the polling units, because you have very long queue. The police is there to ensure orderliness, to ensure the voters are protected, the voting materials are protected, the election officials are protected, and any untoward conduct that is brought to their attention is dealt with it. And I know that because of this security situation, INEC is going to encourage cluster, which means in some polling stations, you are going to have different units, and you are going to have number. That brings the number. The number of these 34,000 are not only deployed to the polling units, and those police officers at the polling stations and units are unarmed. They are civil. The armed officers are in the outer cordon. What do? They only respond to very serious incidents. But as much as possible, those in the polling units, you are not going to see them armed. And you are going to find the blue and black uniform. Both the counter-terrorism, the police mobile force, and the rest of them, and other agencies, they are going to be armed. But at the polling unit, the officers there are not going to be armed.
So what then?
Is to ensure crowd control.
So what then is expected of officers that usually accompany VIPs and some of these candidates on that day during elections? What is expected of them? Are they meant to bear arms? How close are they meant to be as well? Because that's usually an issue that comes up as well.
No VIP is going to go to the polling unit with an armed escort. Never. That has never been the practice. And before then, the police management team usually withdraw those security details. They are withdrawn not to expose these VIPs to attack or the rest of it. But you can't go to the polling unit and your police escort or orderlies with arm. No. At the polling unit, there are no armed officers there unless they come there is a response. But if there is no response, those officers, and so the VVIPs, or VIPs as they may be, will not go to the polling unit with armed escort. Not at all. Because there will be ban on movements. So, and the polling stations are located in such a way that you can walk from your house to the polling unit to cast your vote and go back. And you are not expected to begin to drive from one local government to another. And that is why there will be permanent checkpoints to restrict movement. And all the personnel deployed, they are going to be given ID cards. And those ID cards are not going to be distributed until a time that is so suitable that the officer leading such will be determined. And that could be changed at any moment, so that the officers on duty can identify rogue officers who may be employed by some politicians, I'm sorry to say, to come and disrupt the process. So there will be those for polling units, and there will be those on patrols. All of them are going to be given identification. And so any officer that you see that does not have such identification will be apprehended and questioned. So,
you have spoken quite well about the plans. You have spoken quite well about the plans of the police. And, just listening to you, it sounds very good. And that's essentially what we look forward to. But just before we go on this break, let me take this back to Mr. Okoye and talk about protection of ad hoc staff and generally staff of the umpire INEC. So, Mr. Okoye, we've had cases in the past where ad hoc staff have been intimidated, some of them even beaten. I've had reports of that, beaten by these VIPs and even accompanied by some of their orderlies. What is the plan this time around? Because it's very important to ensure that those people are safe.
Well, in our various interactions with the Inspector General of Police and the leadership of the Nigerian Police Force and other security agencies under the auspices of the Interagency Consultative Committee on Election Security, some of these concerns were raised. The Inspector General of Police also raised this issue at the Stakeholders Forum today, and he made it very clear that no VIP will be allowed into any of the polling units with armed police officers or armed security officers. And he also made it very, very clear that any person who is not authorized to be on the road on election day and is and attempts to be on the road on election day will definitely be arrested and interrogated and possibly prosecuted. Now, the welfare and security of the core members that we are going to deploy is fundamental and is paramount. The welfare and security of all the other categories of ad hoc staff, including our own staff that will be deployed, is paramount. So the Inspector General of Police assured the Commission that priority will be accorded to the security of these categories of staff. So adequate security will be provided where they are the various registration centers where they are going to stay overnight before they are deployed at the first line on Saturday. At the level of the polling units, adequate security will also be provided.
Okoye, I'll let you continue on this trail of thought in a moment. We need to go to break. And don't forget that talk, the issue around the PVCs yet to be collected. I recall that INEC said over 81,000 were ready for collection. About 2 days to that election, just how many have been picked up? And we'll talk about what would happen on that day in terms of the conduct, the Z-pad, the accreditation, and don't forget the other threats that have come up. But that's after this break, everyone. Just stay with us. Well, the election is billed to commence by 8 a.m. on Saturday. So by my calculation, it's just about 60 hours and 27 minutes to that election. Time is really of the essence. And tonight on the program, we've been speaking with Mr. Festus Okoye, INEC National Commissioner and Chairman, Information and Voter Education Committee, joining us from Awka, the Anambra State Capital. We've also had Mr. Wilson Inalego, former police AIG, joining us from our Abuja studio. And I did say earlier on that we'll be joined by Mr. Clement Nwako, who's the Executive Director of PLAC and an election monitor. Now, well, Mr. Nwako, I will come to you in a moment, but let me allow Mr. Okoye land on that very important topic about protecting INEC staff, because I imagine a lot of them listening, don't forget the rumors that came up about some of them deserting their posts earlier on, and they want to be assured as much as possible that while carrying out this very vital exercise, they will be protected. So, Mr. Okoye, if you could just land on that point you were making about protecting INEC staff.
Well, the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission at the various engagements has assured the core members that their security and their safety is top priority. Yes, we have what we call a group life insurance and accident insurance for all ad hoc staff deployed for the election. But you know, no form of insurance cover can make up for the life of a single individual. So we have the assurance of all the security agencies that everything humanly possible will be done to guarantee the safety of all the core members and all the ad hoc staff that will be engaged in this particular election. And as I say, when we went to 3 local government areas today, and I saw the sheer number of persons who came to collect their permanent voters' cards, I became more confident that Saturday's election is being, that the people are looking forward to Saturday with some sense of anticipation. So I'm more confident now than I was before in relation to the conduct of the election come Saturday.
Clement Nwako, you have monitored elections in various shapes and sizes over the years. Mr. Okoye, as you would expect, is quite optimistic about this election. But having followed, the different events leading up to this moment and looking ahead, are you as confident as well?
I am worried. And, Festus on this side of the fence a couple of years ago, just recently would have been as worried or concerned as I am. But I can understand that it's really very important that we do all that we can to ensure that people are encouraged to come out and vote. And I'm quite pleased about INEC's efforts with trying to encourage people to come out and vote. We think it's really critical that the turnout for these elections is significant. The last elections last governorship election that was conducted in Anambra State had one of the lowest turnout of voters in any governorship elections in this country. So I think it becomes even more important at this time that we do not see those numbers diminish. We know that there has been very, very sad violence around Anambra State in recent elections, and there have in the build up to this election, and there has been insinuations about why that violence escalated so very dramatically just before these elections came up. But certainly, I think that the voters in Anambra State will understand that it would be another 4 years of waste if they do not come out and make a choice and make a vote and hopefully work with whoever is elected as governor to help to rebuild the state. So I am concerned, but I think I would like to speak more from the need to encourage voters to come out and vote. We have listened to the police, and it was really good listening to former DIG in Alegu make the point about even though the numbers of security personnel are there, the intention would not be to intimidate voters. And we hope, and we will be observing this. We have observers from the Situation Room and other civil society organizations around all of Anambra State. They would be going around, they will be observing the conduct of security personnel, whether it is the police or the army, or indeed any other security services deployed for these elections. We will be observing their conduct. We will be hoping that their conduct would not aim to intimidate voters, would not aim to discourage voters coming out. And we would like to see the Inspector General of Police instigate and put in proper place mechanisms for receiving reports from Situation Room and other observers about what conduct is exhibited by their police personnel. We'd like to see the police put out contact numbers for complaints about conduct of policemen and other security services. And we will be in constant touch with the security personnel to ensure that they do receive complaints where any emerges. But certainly, it will be really important that the citizens of Anambra State turn out in good numbers to come out and vote.
You know, it will seem your worry is largely centered around security. And I mean, for a lot of people, that's the case. So I'm wondering, for you now, what do you think, or what would you have loved to see in terms of security, perhaps in the build-up to this election, or maybe in the next 2 days before this election? What would you love to see be done in that area? I know people look at security, especially in Anambra, from different perspectives. Some say it is political, some others say it's as a result of agitations and the rest. So different strokes for different folks. But for you, what are the things you feel should be done?
I think it's important that there's security personnel around the state. There is what is called winning the heart and mind. I think that's the direction the security services need to go at this time. There has been lots of complaints of abuse of citizens' rights. My hope is that looking towards the next 2-3 days, that the security personnel will go around the communities in Anambra State, building confidence in citizens that they will be protected. I think any sense that there would be excesses on the part of the security personnel is what needs to be curbed at this time. So the police, the Inspector General of Police, the army, all of the security and para-security services that have been deployed for these elections should move more towards de-escalating the fear in the minds of citizens about engagement or even coming in contact with the security personnel. The police, the security services need to go out and assure citizens that they are there to encourage their confidence, their ability to come out and vote without fear of molestation, whether it is by those who want to stop the elections, and we do hope that, that there is no such case right now, but whether it is by those who want to discourage turnout, or even by security personnel who might be acting in excess of their responsibilities, they need to go out and assure citizens that they will be protected as they come out to vote.
Well, Mr. Awako, if we can, let's perhaps draw from your pool of election experience. Now, I can't remember which election has been this intriguing, governorship election in recent times. Yes, we had Edo and Ondo, which had its own peculiarities, but it would seem that Anambra is a whole different ball game entirely. So can you tell us what is peculiar, particularly peculiar about this election that makes the stakes this high?
I think certainly you do have contest amongst and some of the most active campaigners in these elections have been maybe 3-4 political parties. They all seem to have developed a huge stake to try to win these elections and have deployed a whole lot. And I think that's where you have seen the mix that people talk about the political instigated violence, but also the struggle amongst other parties who would like to see citizens come out and vote, try to go out to campaign. We did have the Osun elections, which was just before the presidential elections in 2019. There was Osun 1 and Osun 2, and Osun 2 was a major concern for all of us because the levels of intimidation and violence was really quite high. We certainly hope that we don't see any of such things happening with respect to this. We did see elections in Rivers State in 2019, where it appeared that there were concerns about the actions of the security services, including the police and so on. That was a major concern. I think that as we head towards 2023, and as we have seen an improved INEC coming up with increased use of technology and making promises about how the elections will improve. It will be important for electoral process that Anambra State represents progress with respect to conduct of elections, and that Anambra State showcases the possibility that 2023 elections will be a good expectation for Nigerians. So nothing as unique as we have now. The levels of fear, the levels of intimidation is high. And that's why I've made the point that the security personnel have a huge onus on them to go out right now and encourage citizens to come out and vote and assure them of their protection.
So let's take this to, I mean, security personnel, you might say, yes, is retired, but you know what they say, never tired. So Mr. Inalegu, in terms of Anambra now, you have spoken about the rules of engagement in an ideal situation, but we all know that Anambra is not ideal. It's peculiar in its own way. So you have, you know, the IPOB agitations, you have the threats of sit at home, which has been, you know, largely underplayed, as it were. But in terms of the police, the strategy by the police, here we've seen the sort of balance between force and show of force and show of presence, as they say. But does the police go ahead to even dialogue sometimes, say, you know what, let's have a sit down. So what are the issues? We want to have an election. This is what we should do. This is what we should not do. Is that something the police does and perhaps has done in this case?
I think the police most times adopt non-kinetic approach to dealing with issues such as the one we are discussing. If you go to the Southeast, the religious leaders are very influential, and it will not be out of place for the police to have a kind of meeting. And I think the peace meeting that they had is one of those approaches. You do that all the time. You have the market leaders. You have the different associations. You invite them. You dialogue with them. That happens all the time. And when you do that, you get their cooperation. Because policing is not military. Policing is more, especially when they're engaged in assignments such as this. Policing is about the heart and minds of the people. And so no police officer, when you talk of the trust and confidence of the public, that's what we are talking about. People get to trust you. If they don't trust you, they aren't going to discuss with you. So in a situation like this, especially in a volatile area such like Anambra, you've got to engage those key stakeholders. And those are the people that will make a difference. Those are the people that will make your job easy. And for the police, you see, people hate injustice. People hate to be treated badly. So if you treat them well, respecting their basic rights, you are going to get their cooperation. And by the way, every officer going for this assignment from all ranks are provided with a small handbook. And then the rules of engagement are clearly spelled out. So no other instruction. And that's the beauty of policing. Policing is where the constable can tell even a police commissioner that this is the statement I've recorded in this case, and it's not going to change it. So the police gives you that right. All rights privileges and immunities are the same from a police constable to the Inspector General of Police. So any police officer who goes out there to misbehave can never say he has been instructed. Because
very quickly, Mr. Analego,
with this book and given adequate briefing. Yes.
Just to be clear, so, I mean, it's not the bishops, the religious leaders, the market men and women and the rest that are agitating, as it were. I mean, you know where these agitations are coming from. And I've referenced IPOB, ESN, and the rest. So I'm saying that, I mean, is there a scenario ever where the police will say, you know what, let's even have a discussion? What are the issues?
The police is going to engage members of the public that they consider post-threat. And then the police will always engage every law-abiding individual. The police is not going to placate anybody, but the police is going to engage every member of the society, either the civil society, either the market union, either the tanker drivers association or tipper drivers, just name them. So if that is what, but the police is not going to go out of her way, I think, to say, oh, because of this election, they're going to bribe them or something. But what the police will normally do is to engage every law-abiding member of the society. That the police will do. And that is a non-kinetic approach that the police will adopt. But in addition, the police has a responsibility to ensure law and order, that lives and property are protected. But the police that I know, and I have, by the way, I conducted the 2019 elections in the 4 states of the Southeast when I was AIG Zone 9 Noma here. And I conducted a lot of elections in the FCT. And what we do, we invite from every strata of the society, and they give you cooperation.
Well, Mr. Analego, that is why we have brought you on the program tonight to share from that, wealth of experience. And it's quite interesting, some of these submissions. But let me take this to Mr. Okoye. So, I mean, there are a lot of questions about collection of PVCs, and I did say we were going to come to that. So what is the state of a collection? I know you had a huge target to meet, as at the last time we spoke. So how far with PVC collections?
Well, all the PVCs have been delivered to the 21 local government areas of the states. In total, the Commission delivered a total of 81,774 PVCs. And as at now, the various registrants are collecting their PVCs in the various local governments. And our officers at the local governments have segregated these PVCs into registration areas. So those who are in a particular registration area, a particular officer is attending to them. And we have assured them that this exercise will go on up till Friday until all the people who want to collect their PVCs have collected. However, there's a certain challenge, and that challenge revolves around the 62,698 individuals who engaged in multiple registration. We didn't print the cards of these individuals. Rather, we archived or quarantined their registration because they engage in multiple registration since they have their previous PVCs. So our officers at the various local governments are explaining to these categories of individuals on why we didn't print their PVCs. But all those who printed, who registered...
now, just so we're clear, pardon me, how many PVCs have been... Yes, you have delivered them. How many have been collected? How many have not been collected?
No, the collection is going on in all the local government areas of all the 21 local government areas of Anambra State, and it's still ongoing. The time we went to Dunukofia local government and Oka South local government with the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, the collection was still ongoing, and we have told them that they will keep on giving out these PVCs until the last person has collected his or her PVCs. So I can't have an accurate figure now until Friday when the collection of the PVCs will stop.
Oh, we're rounding off now. In 30 seconds, Mr. Nwako, let me have your closing thoughts as we look ahead to this election. That's for Mr. Clement Nwako.
I think it's really... Yes, I can hear you. And I think it's really very important for all of us, election observers, the political parties, very importantly, the Independent National Electoral Commission, that this election goes well. INEC has instituted several innovative ideas on how to improve our electoral process. We want to see this in practice, and we want to see that citizens are encouraged to come out and vote. And I think the big onus is on the security services, the police, to encourage people, to give assurances to people to come and vote, knowing that security is a key concern with these elections.
And I think that's a great place to leave it. Mr. Clement Nwako, the Executive Director, Policy and Legal Advocacy Center, PLAC, also an election monitor. We've also had Mr. Festus Okoye, INEC's National Commissioner, and Mr. Wilson Inalego, a former AIG of Police. Gentlemen, it's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for your time, and we wish you the very best in this coming elections. Well, that's been the show for tonight, everyone. Thank you for watching. I'm Kayode Okikiolu. Goodbye.